This is the Buckingham Palace. It sits on 77,000 square meters of land, having 775 rooms, 760 windows, 1,514 doors, and 800 employees who reside inside the palace. The woman who lives behind one of these doors has been the uncontested ruler of England over half a century. Her full name is Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, the most powerful woman in England to whom all the ways lead. The first chapter, The Winter's Story. This beautiful land is the English island in the northwest of Europe, surrounded by cold waters and thick fog. Concurrent with Islam's emergence in Arabia, Christian preachers like Saint Augustine from Canterbury went to these areas in order to preach Christianity. The barbaric tribes of Vikings had attacked these areas many times and had mingled with the native populace of that place. At the end of the 9th century, a person named Alfred gathered the dispersed native tribes under a flag and named himself as the Great Alfred. He was the first king of England. 2 centuries later, the Normans who lived in the northern France conquered England under the leadership of William the Conqueror, and a new government was established there. Normans brought about some civilization and stability in England. The English people were uncivilized Neanderthals so far, who were colonized and exploited by big powers. This stability did not last long. Less than 80 years later, the English people involved in fights against each other to seize the throne, and a civil war broke out. The civil war lasted for 18 years and thousands of people were killed. Sometime later, after the return of stability to England, Richard I, the King of England, took part in the crusade to have involved in occupying Palestine. In the 13th century, the landowners and English proprietors who formed the baron and aristocrat class rioted against the then king and restricted his powers. This was the beginning of constitutional system in England. Despite this political progress, the English people lived in utmost violence. At the beginning of the 14th century, William Wallace, the Scottish Liberal leader, was executed brutally in London. They quartered his body in the applause of the crowd. It was a type of common execution in England. The English people developed their seafaring and trade since the 16th century. However, the benefits gained through them were turned to tools for colonizing other nations. The English nation suddenly turned from poverty to utmost prosperity and glory due to long years of exploiting different nations in Asia, Africa, and America. The powers of the kings did augment. The king's position turned to a religious and saint image. The king from the 16th century onwards has been the head of the Church of England and has been considered as the head of the religion. But at that time, nobody took this event seriously. In 1649, Charles I, the then King of England, was put on trial by the members of the Parliament and executed later on. The leader of this rebel was one of the powerful representatives, Oliver Cromwell. This was the only successful attempt to reach a republic in England. This idea was in contrast to the old royal system of government in which the kingdom would pass down by inheritance. Cromwell's system collapsed sometime later, and the English people restored Charles's son to the throne, and the short-term Republic of Cromwell came to an end. Treason of Cromwell for the English disposition was so serious that they disinterred his body and removed his skull from his body to have punished him. However, the wish for a republic has caught on. After the French Revolution, republicanism was wished for more than ever. The wish for republicanism was so much that the Parliament passed a measure on treason in 1848. In this measure, any attempt to topple the kingdom or a change for the royal system was illegal, and those convicted of this crime faced life sentence or an exile to Australia, which was not very different from a life sentence. Interesting enough, this law was in effect over 150 years, that is to say up to 2003. The First and the Second World Wars had shaken the base of England and Europe's powers. The nations under their yokes became independent one after the other. England did not have her previous colonizing power. Inside this palace, the Palace of Buckingham, everything was also on shaky ground.